Many of today's most difficult safety issues involve operations near or on the ground at the airport. I'd like to expand upon the title of this panel and say that the critical safety issues at our airports span from runway excursions to bird incursions, airport ground operations, air traffic control communications, and more. Addressing airport safety issues requires a cooperative effort between ALPA's line pilots, government, the FAA and Transport Canada, airport management, airline operations, air traffic controllers, and others who work and operate every day on our airports. ALPA works with each and every one of these organizations to identify and resolve airport and ground environment issues in a proactive manner. I'm very pleased to say that as members of the joint FAA Industry Runway Safety Council and the Root Cause Analysis Team, we at ALPA appreciate an excellent working relationship with the FAA, Airlines for America, the National Air Traffic Controllers Association, Airports Council International North America, Aircraft Owners and Pilots Association, and the other member organizations in identifying and implementing solutions to airport issues. It is my pleasure to serve as the moderator for this roundtable discussion on 5 major topics of concern, of which I'll ask each of our panel members to provide their unique perspective. They are ground collisions and their avoidance, bird strike mitigation, runway excursions, winter operations, and airport construction. I'm happy to have with me on this panel individuals from government and industry who have the experience and expertise to discuss all of these issues. All of their biographies are listed in your handouts that you're issued on your arrival today, so please take note of the many accomplishments and positions held by this distinguished panel. Beginning first, to my left, Mr. Patrick Doyle, Director of the Office of Runway Safety at the Federal Aviation Administration. And most notably, Pat is a former ALPA member pilot and fleet manager with Air Wisconsin Airlines. To his left, Mr. Rick Loewen. He is Regional Vice President of Safety for the Southwest Region for the National Air Traffic Controllers Association and is a DFW Tower Controller as well. Mr. Mont Smith, Director of Safety for the Airlines for America. And Mr. Chris Oswald, Vice President of Safety and Technical Operations with Airports Council International North America and the newest industry co-chairman of the FAA's Research and Engineering Development Advisory Committee for Airports, REDAC for short, which I also have the pleasure of serving on also. So welcome, gentlemen. We want this to be a true roundtable discussion on each of the 5 topics, and everyone on this panel has a role in addressing each and every one of them. So gentlemen, please jump in and provide your perspectives. We'll also wrap the session with a short question and answer period for items to touch upon that we've touched upon in this panel. One thing I would like to ask you, the audience, is that when you ask your question, please identify who you are and with which organization you represent. I appreciate it, many thanks for that. Well, let's go ahead and start our discussion on runway safety and ground collision avoidance. ALPA has been actively involved with the FAA's Runway Safety Council and its smaller root cause analysis team, or RCAT, to reduce runway incursions. This group has made excellent progress in investigating these events and developing recommendations to mitigate the reasons or root causes that resulted in the runway incursion. A significant issue to address is pilot and vehicle operator education. What's being done to make sure our pilots and operators on the airfield are aware of the best safety practices? Patrick, start with you.
Steve, thank you, and thank you to the Airline Pilots Association and everyone here for allowing me to attend. We have certainly had our fair share of vehicle pilot deviations, and we are addressing that through several training courses that are being developed currently. The NATCA has been co-sharing with us, along with Flight Standards, to develop a training course for all of our ground vehicle operators. We take it very seriously. We've had several in the very recent past that could have been serious events. And though there has been training in the past for vehicle operators on airports, we have found that we could go a lot deeper into that training, provide possibly a better training course, and also recurrent training. So all of these things are being developed as we speak, and they are very high priority for the Office of Runway Safety.
Great. And how about for the airport operator as well?
Well, from the airport operator standpoint, we've had long-standing training programs, and I do have to give a shout out to our companion, or I won't really say companion, an organization, maybe sister organization, American Association of Airport Executives. Steve mentioned them. And they've been probably more significantly involved than my organization, ACI, has on the line, providing training materials, best practices, and training courses. I think some of the developments really have been making those types of training programs, I think, more closely resemble what drivers are actually facing through simulator-based training. I think that's taken some root, larger airports more notably than some of the smaller ones. But I think as important as training or kind of the recurring types of activities just to encourage awareness overall, because I think the training's as good as it can be those couple weeks after you're through that training course, but to provide, I think, all drivers, with the same types of tools that our pilots have, checklists, kind of mental lists to review as you get into that vehicle and as you're operating it. Again, as important as that recurring training can be. We've worked to distribute materials, checklists to our member airports at ACI that can be provided to all drivers as they enter the vehicles, practices to engage in as you're driving, as well as checks to make as you get into the vehicles. Things as simple as making sure you don't have any FOD on the vehicle when you're entering it, that all the vehicle systems are operational, and that you've got the frequencies tuned in and you're ready to change. You know what frequencies you need to change to as you progress across the airfield. We also have, and I've brought my visual aids, through our world organization, a number of standards and best practices that we're currently in the midst of updating. I'd point specifically to the Airside Safety Handbook that we produce through the world organization. That a new version of this is due to be released this coming year. So I think a number of activities on a number of fronts, not just training, but that ongoing awareness that's needed as well.
And that's great. There's some info sharing going on there that works just like we do here with our member airlines. A lot of different carriers come from different backgrounds, different demographics inside of our pilot group. We get together, we share best practices. Mm-hmm. What one airline has, the other airline may not. And I think that's great that you're doing that with the airports. Excellent. As we well know, airports contain a mix of traffic, and statistics show serious Category A and B incursions are up this year in the general aviation demographic. We as airline pilots share this airspace and those runways. What's being done to make sure the general aviation community is as well trained as a professional airline pilot?
Steve, you're right. The general aviation incursions are up this year. Part of this, we feel, is a better reporting and more thorough reporting system that is allowing controllers to report events and increase the quality of the events that are reported. However, you bring up a good point. We have a large general aviation population out there, a community that is very tough in some cases to reach out to. We have over 600,000 certificated pilots across the United States. When you try to break down what organizations do these pilots belong to, whether it be the Aircraft Owners and Pilots Association, which there's roughly 400,000 members there, EAA, the Experimental Aircraft Association, there's about 160,000 members there, ALPA, somewhere in the 60,000 neighborhood. Even if every one of those pilots belong to one organization, you've still got roughly 7,000 pilots out there that maybe don't belong to any organization, might be flying off of a grass strip somewhere, not a controlled field, but have the opportunity to fly into a controlled field at any moment's notice. How do we reach those 7,000 pilots? And how do we know that it is those 7,000 pilots? I mean, obviously we've got other people operating on the airports, as we just talked about. When I came into the Office of Runway Safety, I found that several of the manuals and flight publications that the FAA offers up were in conflict with each other. So that was one of the first projects that I tried to tackle. We took care of the Pilot's Handbook of Aeronautical Knowledge, which is available on the FAA website. We took that from being a small 2-page section on runway incursions, and we allowed a whole chapter to be devoted strictly to runway incursions. So we've got about 25 pages now that it's all been freshly updated. Again, it's available on the website. We are trying to promote that the Pilot Handbook of Aeronautical Knowledge is out there for aspiring pilots, flight instructors that are looking to get involved in aviation. I know when I came up through the GA ranks, that tool wasn't necessarily there, but it's free. It's available to all pilots to take a look at on the internet. In addition to that, we found that the message that was in the Airman's or Aeronautical Information Manual was just a little bit off on some of the subjects that we were trying to portray. And to have conflicting information in two documents that are available from the FAA website was certainly an issue. So we are cleaning up the Aeronautical Information Manual as well to get all of our manuals in concert with each other. Trying to reach all of these pilots across the nation, we have 9 regional offices scattered across the nation, and we do a lot of outreach. We just had a booth presence at the EAA Air Venture Air Show in Oshkosh, Wisconsin. That is a very large event. Everybody knows about Oshkosh. We also participate in the Sun and Fun event down in Florida earlier in the spring. We have a booth there staffed by Runway safety folks. That is a large event. Both of those are very large events for our office. We do a lot of outreach there. We have a lot of handouts, a lot of materials, and some of those materials we partner with the Aircraft Owners and Pilots Association. AOPA has been a partner of ours for many, many years here. We have a set of flashcards that we produce that deal strictly with runway safety, and the flashcards are available to all pilots at all of these events. They're also available for free online through the FAA website, through our runway safety website. In addition to these, what I consider to be major events, we do all of the smaller events too. We go to flight instructor refresher clinics. We are trying to get the word out to the flight instructors, which we all know is a very fluid and dynamic situation right now with the airlines hiring at relatively fast pace. It's hard to get to the flight instructors that are training all of our new pilots. So we attend the flight instructor refresher clinics. We've also found that in the past, runway safety was not necessarily a point of focus for a student pilot or a private pilot as they're rising through the ranks, even through commercial CFI flight instructor or ATP. We partnered with Flight Standards, and we now have in the practical test standards, which is the Bible for getting a rating, we have a special section specifically on runway safety. So pilots will be trained on runway safety, and they will also be checked on runway safety during their check rides for all of those ratings as they progress through the ranks. Those are just a few of the small things that we're doing, Steve. We have a big job ahead of us trying to find out who those 7,000 pilots are that may be our next runway incursion is a very difficult task. We have partnered with a company called Turning Point Technologies, and Turning Point gives us a system that we use at our flight instructor refresher clinics and other outreach events. And we use that system to do a polling or a testing system of all the pilots, ground vehicle operators, whoever is present. And we do an off-the-cuff a test, just kind of a version of what we're doing here today, a little bit of a roundtable, a little bit of discussion. And we take those results from those tests and we compile them at the end to try to figure out what it is that we're missing as the FAA. What are we doing? Where are we failing to try to get the message out? And so with the Turning Point technology system, we have a very standardized set of questions. We compile all the answers at the end. We do training at each of these events on site. After each question, we will go through the answer with the people that are present, and then we log all those things and come back and compile those. And it's been a very enlightening experience. We found that there are many places that we as the FAA or as our designees in the flight instructor ranks or our DPE, designated pilot examiners, have been failing. We haven't necessarily been checking or training or testing pilots on some of these items. And something as simple as a runway hold short line. We see people crossing the hold short line several times a day. How do we get the word out that we have to stop and hold short at the hold short line? You have to have clearance to cross. And so something that seems very basic to a pilot like yourself and all of the airline pilots that are here today, we do see it in the airline ranks. I hate to say it, but it's not just a GA problem. Our GA problem is roughly 80% of the runway incursions, but there's still 20% out there that are caused by the airline pilots, the fractional pilots, the military, and other various factions. So this isn't just a GA issue, although we do tend to spend most of our focus on GA. We plan that the airlines will train and teach runway safety as much as they can. We've also delved into providing materials at all of the simulator training facilities across the United States. I know when I went for one of my training sessions here with the FAA, I walked into one of the simulator facilities and asked, where is all of your training material for runway incursions and other things that the FAA offers for free? and they didn't have anything on site. So I've asked my staff to get into all of the simulator training facilities, both airline and the corporate world, and let's get some of these materials out there. Again, everything is available for free from the Office of Runway Safety and through our website. So for those of you that are in the training departments at the airlines or working with the 91Ks or fractional operators, we are asking you, we're begging you to please get in touch with us, ask us for what materials you would like, and we will gladly ship them to you at no charge so that you can have them available in your training departments.
That's great. Thank you, Pat. I'll tell you what, from an outside observer, seeing the activity that's going on inside the FAA regarding this issue, you're doing an excellent job. And we believe that there's folks that are in the offices there trying to solve the incursion problem, and you're doing a great job with that, so appreciate all that hard work. Sometimes people with the best view at an airport are the ones hundreds of feet in the air, like our air traffic controllers. What are NACA controllers doing to keep pilots away from runway incursions and ground errors? Rick?
Well, in the last couple of years, 3 years really, NACA has had the opportunity to get more involved with the FAA, working collaboratively on a whole number of projects. We've got a couple of hundred of our people plugged into a lot of different programs, just like I work with you all on the RCAT and other runway safety issues. And the big thing that we're really seeing, I believe, the best gains and improvements through that collaboration is that a lot of our training in the past was sort of a rote thing. I've been doing air traffic for 23 years, and for 23 times I've seen the exact same briefing on taxi routes, thunderstorms, icing, and so on. And in the last year or so, NACA controllers have been involved in changing that training into something that's real and tied to things that are actually happening, and will be beneficial for controllers to be able to apply that. And it's not a thing where anymore they're just saying, Rick, go downstairs and read the briefing on thunderstorms anymore. They'll send the whole crew down there, and then you'll have a discussion about the issue. So we're being more proactive, hopefully, and less reactive to that point. And then by developing the training programs ourselves, I think they're better received by, hopefully, better received by my peers to know that we help to develop them and that we seek their input in how best to make those improvements. And what I have found very interesting, and I'm sure you all experience it because you visit a lot of airports, historically I don't, they almost all seem to do it a little bit different everywhere they go. So we're sort of trying to homogenize better the way we're doing things, and no one went out with the malicious intent to just do something differently. It's just there hasn't been this system-wide oversight, and having us involved in getting and going from tower to tower to tower and talking to people and making suggestions that if you would look at it perhaps in a slightly different manner, you might be able to improve things. And a lot of that comes from the RCAT. So the RCAT, an issue may come up, and with the GA being an issue, if I can, I'll go out to that airport and observe the operations, and having the benefit of a controller's mind, which is a scary thing to see, I can kind of understand how they've gotten to where they are and perhaps find a place where they may be able to massage their operation air traffic-wise to hopefully put the pilot in a better position to succeed. So if the rule says do A, there are several different ways to accomplish that. And I can just rotely say taxi via blah, 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 and you may or may not find your way to the runway. Or I could choose to break it into a smaller group of taxiways, maybe issue what we would call a paper stop, hoping to never actually stop you, but at least as a safety net. Turn left alpha, hold short of taxiway Bravo. And for a person in a small aircraft on a big airport such as the one that I work at, that's a lot of concrete. And until I went out on the airport and drove around with some of the airport operators, I had no idea what a hold pad that can hold 30 MD-80s looks like until that thing's big. You know, from 300 feet in the air, 4 miles away, it's really not all that big. But that's a lot of concrete, so I can see how people can get lost out there. So we're trying to, through our SATs, the local regional runway safety meetings that are held at the towers, get our controllers involved in those. One of the messages that I'm sending out to our reps is to please do the airport tour. I know you've worked at that particular airport for 30 years and maybe you helped build it, but when was the last time you were out on it? And having that perspective of it, that's huge. Also, our new, used to be called the FAM, or Familiarization Training Program. Now it's a Flight Deck Training Program. Hopefully some of you have had NACA controllers in your flight deck. That's an invaluable experience for us. One, just to, learn about flying an aircraft and the impact of a lot of things, because a lot of my peers don't have a flying background. But also, if you could help us by, as you do your briefing prior to leaving the gate, because we don't want you doing anything but driving your aircraft around when you are, point out ahead of time what you know are the hot spots or the danger spots on that airport as you taxi out. You're the experts of what it looks like from your perspective, and I just know that I say the same thing hundreds and hundreds of times a day, and it works out 99.9% of the time just the way I planned it to be. So if you can tell the controller ahead of time, look for this, whether you're talking on the surface of the airport or maybe the arrival you're going to fly or the departure route you're going to fly, that will help them to pay attention a little bit better, because we walk into your cockpit and it's just like sitting in front of these lights right here. It's just like opening the refrigerator in the middle of the night. You can't really see anything because you haven't got that vision. So help us learn from you, and that'd be great.
Definitely. One key word you said was collaboration, and I think the FAM position that we've all taken up, everyone on this stage, as far as getting the controllers back into the cockpits, is something that we endorse, because as you know, we're training rapid numbers of controllers out there, and for them to get in with the cockpit and work with training programs at the airlines. I know the airlines have been great in opening up their simulators just to show operations such as a runway change, which can be a complex situation for both the controllers as well as for us in the cockpit. And it takes collaboration, all of us working together, and I think that's great, and the avenues are there. So
yeah, and if I could touch on that too,
sure.
I believe, I'm not involved in it, but I heard yesterday, and I'm glad to hear it, I guess NACA and ALPA are working together on not just us coming into your cockpit, but trying to get you to come into our control facilities as well. Some of them are more convenient to get to than others, but we'd love to have you up anytime we can get you in the tower or in the Tracon to come see what we do, and guarantee a horrible cup of coffee any time of day. But peel back that curtain a little bit, and not because I need you to understand what it is or what I do, but I just think that for all of us to have this partnership, collaborative type relationship. When I got in air traffic 23 years ago, it was at Barnes Municipal Airport in Westfield, Massachusetts. Every Friday we had a tailgate, and the tailgate was literally a pickup truck's tailgate was sitting on a spool over by the airport operators, but we had A-10 pods from the fighter wing would come over, local flight schools would come over, pods. We'd just sit around, have a beverage, maybe barbecue a shrimp or something, and talk. And just, it was really a great way for everybody to have an understanding of what it is that you're trying to accomplish, what I'm trying to accomplish, and how we can, both get to have a good day with it.
Definitely. Anytime you're having a barbecue, Rick.
Every day, man. I'm a
I'll
good
be there
cook
with
too.
you. Let's go ahead and move on our discussion to the subject of bird strike mitigation. Airports are required to have a wildlife management plan. However, we continue to see bird strikes. Oh, we of course know birds were here before us, and they were here first. But we've seen bird strikes take on a new focus since the U.S. air collision, which resulted in a water landing on the Hudson. What technologies are being brought to airports to address the risk? Chris?
Sure, and I think a SIPTR was already here, I've heard, so you've probably been already well educated on avian radar. I mean, that's one of the systems that's out there. And I think there are other manufacturers of those technologies that are improving awareness for the wildlife managers at airports around the country. Now, is that a one-size-fits-all situation or a system? Is that something that would be applicable to all airports? And I think more importantly, from the constituency that I represent, the airport operators, is it necessarily going to be a real-time type of system that's going to be capable of providing real-time advisories? In some cases, yes. In other cases, I think the use may be more periodic to enhance the wildlife hazard management programs that airports already have out, to identify habitats that are that should be of particular concern, things that airports may not be aware of because they're off airport property, or they just may not have the data available to them from their periodic surveys, the more conventional surveys of wildlife that have gone out at the facilities to be aware of. Getting beyond avian radar and its potential applications, both real-time and in improving wildlife hazard management programs, I think the expansions of the wildlife hazard management programs and the needs for wildlife hazard assessments, which are being pursued by FAA through Part 139 rule changes, will make some difference. I think those are certainly, from a cost perspective, they're always of concern to our members, but I think broadening the number of airports that produce those plans and conduct their assessments, more notably, will help to increase awareness and certainly help to focus attention, airport operators that may not have traditionally done those activities, on the extent of their wildlife program. I think the focus that came out of, I mean, there's always some good that comes out of accidents and incidents that go on. I think the focus that came out of the Miracle on the Hudson and the fact that there was a positive outcome coupled with the media attention that it brought has helped us overall, all the industry segments, I think, really to pay more diligent attention to wildlife hazards throughout the system. I did want to point to a particular challenge, though, and something that my constituency, the airport operators, really struggle with, and that's really what we deal with beyond the airport fence within 5 to 10 nautical miles of the airport. I think it's still very much a Wild West situation when we get out into that particular area of airspace. It's something where our challenges are significant because we're not just who has jurisdiction is an incredibly significant question there. We've had some positive movement, I think, in the FAA reauthorization bill that have enabled the airports, given the airports and the Department of Agriculture a little bit more authority in areas like national park lands. I think specifically the New York case around Kennedy with the wildlife refuge and the ability to do appropriate depredation activities, the takings of large avian species, Canadian goose and Canada goose in particular. We need to see more of that and need to see, I think, more authority given to wildlife managers in those areas that are off airport, and some appropriate legal protections and appropriate expeditious routes to engage in activities like depredation if it's necessary, close in off airport. Those are the areas where I think we collectively continue to struggle with management of both habitat and the wildlife themselves, be that avian or be it mammalian. So.
And definitely, the airports are sometimes built away from the urban area and put out where what used to be a forest or an orchard is now an airfield. Yeah. And there's a natural bird attracted there. One discussion that we're going to have next week at the Joint USA-Canada Bird Strike Committee meeting, where everyone gets together, stakeholders, and we collaborate. One of the discussions, and one thing that comes out of that organization, I try to make it every year, and what we're starting to see now is a tactical shift in where, instead of just harassing a bird and using noisemakers and sending someone out with a truck and a vehicle to chase the bird away, is to think about why are they actually at the airport to begin with. Standing water and short grass is a natural bird attractant. And one thing that we've seen is that airports are now taking a look at property off-site, purchasing it, actually developing a pond and putting short grass there. And then coupled with harassment, the birds, if they know they can get a good meal somewhere off the airport, they won't come to the airport. If no one's going to harass them just off-site, away from the arrival and departure corridors, and it's worked. And our folks, our partners with the BASH program at the military, have been investigating this, and we're starting to bear fruit and see it happen. And I think it's a great way to mitigate the bird hazard at the airfield, rather than just constantly go back and chase them away. Well, their offspring will be back the next day. And of course, you raise the issue of the regulatory requirements. I mean, you capture, kill, and that sort of thing. That's a very touchy subject with environmentalists and regulators, and understand that it's, we all have to work together to come up with a solution, because the hazard is there. The hazard is there. Well, if the airport determines a bird hazard at the airfield, how does the information get back to the pilots to make safe and educated decisions regarding this risk? Birds in the vicinity of the airport don't really work. Something that might be of use, which we will discuss next week, is perhaps in the way the military describes it, low hazard, medium hazard, high hazard, using the technologies that are out there on the market, such as avian radars, biologist counts. And That being said, speaking of the biologists, a major kudos goes to the USDA and the FAA's Wildlife Department for accelerating their work at airports and trying to make sure that the bird risk is addressed, especially coming out of the Hudson incident. On the topic of runway excursions, we've seen the numbers increase dramatically overseas, and the numbers have stayed steady here in North America. Is there a concern on the part of the stakeholders on this stage here that this uptick may reach our shores? Patrick?
Well, there certainly is, Steve. From the FAA side, we are very concerned with excursions. Excursions have been in the news here as of late. For those of you that read some of the publications out there, you're starting to see a lot of articles and a lot of interest developed in excursions. And there have been many deaths and many $1 million worth of insurance claims paid out over the last 15 years, dealing mainly with runway excursions. And it is a huge, huge source of focus for us rather suddenly. We have worked with our international partners. We have developed, or we've adapted the same definition for runway excursions that is being used worldwide. And we in the Office of Runway Safety are beginning to track excursions on a daily basis. The Flight Safety Foundation has been doing something of this nature for a number of years. We are going to expound on that and track excursions and try to do root cause analysis on those just like we do with incursions. We've got the database, we've got the tools, we've got the people, we've got the infrastructure, so that it was a logical choice for us to pursue excursions as well. There are several companies out there that are developing new technology. Some of you pilots that are out there flying for JetBlue, Alaska Airlines, or America Airlines are already familiar with this, and it is a system that is attached to the landing gear that records the speed of touchdown, the weight of the aircraft at touchdown, and also takes all of the data off the ARINC 429 bus, off the flight data recorder, puts all this information together and comes up with a number as to what kind of braking coefficient was available on that particular landing. Now, this system is in use already nationwide, actually worldwide, with some of these carriers. And it is a very interesting process that they're working through. We are collaborating, the collaboration word again, we are collaborating with them to try to get funding through MITRE to further the studies that they're doing and make something of this. We all know, being an airline pilot for Air Jamaica may be a little bit different than somebody flying here for Delta out of Minneapolis. Someone's definition of poor braking may be completely different from someone else's. And so we need to get to the bottom of this. And we do have the systems that are out there. We've got the Beaumont, and we've got all the different meters that are out there. Everybody has the charts in the cockpit that you can reference. The problem with that is that it slows down the departure and arrival rate. If we have to send somebody out on a runway in order to get a reading of the friction coefficient, you're taking that runway out of service for a period of time, 15, 20 minutes. And when you're out there holding, waiting for this reading to be taken, or you're possibly even diverting because we've got traffic on the runway trying to take a reading, this new system really makes a lot of sense. If we have every aircraft, and it obviously wouldn't go to every aircraft, but if we have 20, 30 Airbus 320s or 737s all lined up coming down the pike, and every one of those aircraft is reporting. Every time it touches down, it reports a numerical value, all goes to a central database, and that information is piped through ACARS back up to the next aircraft that are in the queue. Not only will it be a help for the airline pilots that are out there, but it'll also be a help for the air traffic controllers, who now could actually build a hole if they wanted to. Get the equipment out on the runway, plow the runway, treat it, and then get the aircraft back in line again for arrivals. If we could use that as a planning technology on the ATC side and a technology for the pilots, so that there is a steady and a good numerical value that is there, it's a wonderful technology, and we are pushing this very, very hard to try to help with the excursions. Coupled with this, Steve, is my concerns. I came into this office in December, and I've got a couple of pet projects that we've developed here in very short order, and one of those is the runway safety area. Here in the United States, the runway safety area terminology is not as well developed as it is in some countries overseas, and we don't spend a lot of time talking about the RSA. The RSA is an area just outside of the runway itself that is graded and smoothed for a potential runway excursion. All of the equipment that is in the RSA should be built on a frangible type structure so that it can break off low to the ground and not cause further damage to the aircraft. That's wonderful in design, but our air traffic controllers don't necessarily have all the tools to know exactly where the RSA is, let alone what is allowed into an RSA during air carrier operations. And I've found that we have conflicting guidance here in our FAA regulations, not necessarily in the regulations, but in some of the other guidance that has been put out. And so if you were to go ask a controller what is allowed in the RSA during a Part 121 operation, you could possibly get 3 different answers, and all 3 answers would be correct. So we are tackling this. It's a huge thing for us to jump into here. I know I won't make everybody a friend as I go through this process, but what I'd like is a definition, and let's get this defined. Let's let everybody know in the airline community and in the air traffic world what exactly is allowed in the RSA during Part 121 operations and what is not. And if mowers are not allowed in there, then we need to somehow figure out how to cut the grass during other times of the day or times of the night. If men and equipment or personnel and equipment are allowed in the RSA, do we have to allow the big van truck that has all the equipment on board into the RSA? Or could the tech ops person walk out to the nav aid that he's working on, the PAPI lights or the VASI lights, and change a light bulb without parking the van in the RSA? So we've got a lot of things we're trying to tackle here with the excursion and incursion definition, and the RSA is become a huge subject in this. So we're tackling it, again, collaboration amongst all the folks here on the stage, all branches of the FAA. We're all working at this very hard. I'd like to bring this to a close relatively quickly.
Definitely, and to be fair to the Office of Airports at the FAA, they've put out the Part 139 regulation book is really only, it's a very thin document. Basically, everything's driven through AC circulars regarding airport condition, and I have to applaud the Office of Runway Safety, or excuse me, Airport Safety and Standards, AS 100, that are putting together new AC circulars as we speak, doing things such as moving glide slope shacks outside of the RSA so that the vehicles can transit in and out without having to disturb that RSA, which is the safety buffer for us, if in case we do end up off of the pavement and in the grass or dirt surrounding the airfield. So I appreciate your work on that. Chris?
Yeah, I was just going to add something. I think regarding kind of definitions of the RSA, I might take a little bit of issue with I think where we stand in the U.S. relative to other countries. And I just know, because I work cross-border, our membership includes folks up in Canada as well as here in the U.S. And when you look to the runway end safety areas, whether the ICAO terminology for the overrun areas, I think there, up in Canada, there's been significant debate over the last 2.5 years over how to define those, how to define clearance, and that's something where in the U.S. We've had well-defined guidance, I think, on the overruns. When we look to the side wings of the RSAs, I think there is pretty clear guidance. I don't see that necessarily as much globally. So I think there's more to be done, especially on the operational side. And I think with getting to standardization, with what types of mowing operations, what types of maintenance operations are allowable within the RSAs is great. But I would say we're building from a very strong foundation with the definitions, and foundations that don't exist necessarily globally. And I think with the premise of the question that you put forward first, Steve, where we look at, are we going to be seeing, will we be seeing kind of importation of excursion, increased excursion risk to the U.S. And North America in general? I'm hopeful not, because I think it's really that a lot of the rest of the world really needs to catch up with us more than vice versa. And that's not going to be true in all areas. I'd say places like safety management systems, deployment, that's someplace where in the U.S. We're probably playing a little bit more catch up. But when we look at the standards, actual provision of clearance areas, protected surfaces, the U.S. has been in what I see anyway, a very, very solid leadership role there. And to Mike O'Donnell and his staff's credit over at Office of Airports, as you state.
Most definitely. And I look over towards Mont regarding this excursion issue. And I'm blessed to be working for an airline that takes the runway incursion, excursion situation seriously and make sure that I'm prepared to use proper threat and error management to try to avoid that risk. What are airlines that you represent, Mont, doing to get a pilot to identify those risks and mitigate the hazards?
Thanks. Thanks for asking, Steve. For one thing, we just took a survey recently, about 2 weeks ago, on what are the top 5 concerns for our carriers at Day 4A. And this is certainly runway incursions and excursions, and the general category of runway safety is one of the top 5 of our 11 participating carriers. So it's very much on the forefront of our radar screen. I like to say it keeps me up at night sometimes. It's one of those things that it would be unacceptable. No carrier could afford an event which could result in an aircraft hull loss or fatalities involved in a runway event like that. So we work it pretty aggressively. As a member of the commercial aviation safety team, I'm currently involved with a runway excursion joint safety analysis team and joint safety implementation team. And it's a very complex process to collect data, analyze all the factors involved that can generate, particularly we're talking now runway excursion. So you could have a long landing, you could have tailwinds or crosswinds, contaminated runway, late deployment of spoilers, maybe insufficient use of braking, et cetera. The talk about braking coefficient, runway braking action is certainly one of those hurdles we have to overcome. And I think as Pat has mentioned, there's some technologies that seem very promising. But as far as looking at what the work of the TALPA, the Takeoff and Landing Performance ARC, Aviation Rulemaking Committee, I know I shouldn't talk in terms of acronyms here, but I know I'm in a friendly audience that understands many of them, but maybe some of our folks out there in the video world do not. But that Aviation Rulemaking Committee did a very aggressive job of looking at a lot of the factors, and certainly we support the 15% margin for landing performance that carriers are now required to calculate before landing in near real-time conditions, so that the crew has a better appreciation for the handling characteristics of their aircraft under those conditions. So much research is taking place. We've got to feed all this back into our training programs, be sure that the arrival briefing that the captain gives and shares with the first officer, and when the crew discusses the factors they can comprehend and perceive, that they have threat and error management techniques to deal with those, that the briefing includes the what ifs, which are frequently you can't always anticipate, but you know, a good briefing, kind of a pre-rehearsal of procedures, will contribute a great deal toward a successful outcome. We look at some of the ones we've had in this country. Fortunately, they have not been, particularly, you know, as Ms. Gilligan briefed this morning, we're in the safest period of commercial aviation in our country. So many of those events have not resulted in fatalities or injuries or substantial damage to the aircraft. A few have. It's noteworthy to say, and I think we're going to talk about this, but Engineering Materials Arresting Systems has saved at least one aircraft from going off a precipitous cliff at the end of a runway, not in the not too distant past. So some of those technologies at the high risk areas. I mean, I came from being a director of safety at Hawaiian Airlines. We had a number of FAA special airports in Hawaii that were very close in proximity to water areas, open ocean areas, and whatnot, are very unforgiving. So we really need to address those high-risk areas first, give them the prominence. So I think the work is going on. I think it's very collaborative. We all need it. We all have skin in the game. We all need to aggressively look at the low-hanging fruit. What are the things that we can do now, maybe with very little cost, and then as cost progresses, what is the risk reduction associated with that? So how can we get there on a pretty steep climb gradient?
Rick, did you have?
Yeah, I was just going to add, dealing with the aircraft once it goes off the runway obviously is one thing, but the best thing that we can do for each other is to never get into that position. And as newer aircraft are coming into the fleets, the new 737s and whatnot, they don't descend. I'm not telling you anything new. They don't like to go down. I've never seen something that big that didn't want to go down before, but it happens. And you're getting RNP arrival routes. So that's putting you and your aircraft in positions that right now you may not be in. So, for example, if ordinarily I would vector you on a downwind, you're probably in a certain power setting and a configuration to do the speed and everything. Well, if these new procedures are all designed to be zero power or low power or never getting back on the throttles again. So controllers have this thing, you cannot stand to watch a gap go by. There needs to be an airplane in there for whatever reason. So if you're on a 5-mile wide downwind and you're 5,000 feet above the field and you go 3 miles past the airport and I turn you to a base heading and you know you can't get down from there, that's the time for the unable. And our ATSAP program, which is fairly new, teaching us how to report safety concerns. Operating the computer is one thing, but to be able to analyze your operation and say, you know, we've done this every day for the last 20 years, but it doesn't seem to make a whole lot of sense. Write out your report, and if there's a few of them or one of them, a whole bunch of smart people get together and they can analyze those and apply a little bit of science and data mining and whatever else and decide if, okay, that is or is not a safe practice, or maybe it's something we need to teach people how to do. So help us to put you in the position to succeed and recognize early. I know a lot of pilots are can-do just like controllers are, and I can get it down from here. And you know, I've seen pilots, I don't think they log the approach, it's more of a re-entry. How they get them down, I have no freaking idea. I mean, pardon my language, but they do. They, you know, the leading edges are glowing, and you know, controllers. When I was working approach control, I loved the 727 because it went down and it was really fast. It was really good at it. So help us help you with that, and that's communication. And if you fly to an airport where they automatically, every time, the normal procedure is a slam dunk, or it's a turn, or it's this thing or that thing, and we're putting you in a position that you don't like, let us know now, and let's deal with it, you know, in this sort of a forum where we can learn and give you what it is that you know, what it is you need. There's no sense in doing it the way we've been doing it, because you're not flying the same airplane you were flying when I started doing this.
That's a great point, Rick, and thanks for backing that up. I started on the 727, and the joke was, if you could see the runway, you'll make it. The 767 with winglets that I fly now, you have to shoot it down. It takes a lot to get that airplane down on the ground. It wants to fly all day. There's one thing I can say, though. I have seen, as a line pilot at my airline, I have seen a sea change in attitudes regarding the ability to just say, go around. And I think that's something that we need to spread amongst every airline that's represented in this room, that it's okay. My management has said it's okay if it does not look good, if it looks like you're a little too fast or you're landing long, going around and taking a data point from it later, saying, well, why were you in that situation? Well, the controller turned us in a little bit close, or didn't realize this was happening, or wasn't aware of the situation, or I was fatigued. That gets out there. It allows groups like this to get together, collaborate, and come up with safer practices. So I applaud the airlines for taking that attitude recently.
And last night, Steve and I were talking about go-arounds, and people avoid a go-around. Avoid a go-around at all costs. And really, from our perspective, I don't feel that at all. It's hard work when there's a go-around, when there are a lot of other airplanes in the airspace that you're going to be going into. The only ones that really bother me are the ones that I cause. So if my lack of planning puts you in a position where, or me in a position where I have to send you around because I turned you in too tight, or I didn't get an aircraft off the runway in a timely manner, or I loaded the runway for departure and it was too tight of a spot, those sting. You know, those feel bad. That's a moment for professional development. Everybody's going to have those at some point in their career. Hopefully they never become one of those come to Jesus moments. But yeah, you want to go around? Go around. I'm going around. And it's better for you to know, you're all professionals, we're all professionals. If you know 10 miles ago that this is a lousy approach, this is not going to work, or I'm behind the airplane, or these situations where you have a tailwind aloft, but the wind on the ground is not like that. We can see it because we're vectoring, and we see that you're 20 knots faster in the air or whatever, and we get pilot reports, well, the wind's 270 at 85 at the marker. Okay, well, your wheels aren't that long, so why do I need to know that? We kind of do, but that's the mentality is, but you need to know that. So if the wind is blowing you, that fast at altitude, and you know that the wind change is going to be fairly close to the ground, and you're going to be having greater ground speed than normal. We're not pilots, so we don't understand all of that. We understand how long what our average runway occupancy is, how much we need to have for space on final to get us what we need to have at the last moment. So if you see that, and your aircraft I know are telling you the winds now, and you see that 10 miles ago, speak up. This isn't going to work approach. We want to do something different. Okay, there's a way to do that.
Definitely, and not if there's any airline CFOs in the room, but it's thousands of dollars for a wide-body airplane to go around and to do that, and it's not a situation that we take lightly and just want to promote that it's something that we're going to do. But what needs to happen with our line pilots is we need to fill out good safety reports through the ASAP program and let our airlines know the reasons why, because folks here and in this room can get together, and maybe it's a training issue, maybe perhaps it's an air traffic issue, maybe there's something we can address and to eliminate the risk and hazard, but most importantly to keep our airplanes moving and get our passengers and cargo to where they need to be on time. So, Mont, you had something to say?
No, I just comment on that I wholeheartedly support, and we talk about this at our safety council almost every time we meet, that it's a non-penalty maneuver. It's a judgment issue. The crew working with good CRM and following their SOP and understanding that there are many situations where it's right down to the wire, and you can't always predict what is going to happen. So I investigated 2 non-fatal but NTSB reportable accidents in my short tenure at Hawaiian. Both of them were in the runway environment. Both arguably probably could have been avoided by a go-around, although they were at such critical points in the landing profile that typically pilots would say, hey, we wouldn't typically go around from here. But when you look in the aftermath of the accident, one resulted in a considerable amount of damage to an aft pressure bulkhead on a narrow body. The other one ended up with a wide body in the water. You have to go back from that point and say what were all the contributing factors. And in fact, the wide body accident was classic. It was night, contaminated runways, a displaced threshold, poor coordination between, in that case, the dispatcher and flight following, providing the captain and the crew with updated information on destination, island destination 5.5 hours away from Hawaii. So when you do the forensics on something like that, you say there's something here for everybody. There's a takeaway for everybody. And that's what we need to get people to think about is think about the what ifs. We want every flight to be routine, but we know that the captain's faced with an awful lot of decision making, and good preparation for what can be expected at arrival contributes a lot. And as Rick said, I'm a big believer in broadcasting the message from a mentor of mine down in Charlotte, a captain named Wes Googe, who is a ground training instructor for U.S. Airways. But Wes is of the genre that flew the 7.2s and on into the latest aircraft in the fleet. And what they've set up with U.S. Airways is they'll bring people over, the new controllers, new grads from Oklahoma City that come to the Tower and Tracon in Charlotte. They'll bring them over for an hour of ground school and then an hour in the simulator, basically showing them, talking about aircraft performance issues, showing them what the effects of a late runway change can be, a low-level wind shear, loss of separation. It's a marvelous program as long as we have the simulator time available to do it voluntarily. United is doing the same thing out in Denver. So those are the kinds of programs that I think we can spread that knowledge base and help people and in the common good of sharing the knowledge and building our expertise. I think that's the way to go.
Definitely. And we've talked about the runway safety areas a little bit here, and we've touched upon the Talpa Arc and contaminated runways, so a little of this is it's going to come together pretty good here. The runway safety area is a defined surface area around the runway in case of an overrun or an undershoot to prevent against damaging event to the aircraft or injuring passengers and cargo. What's being done to provide an increased margin of safety at those airports without adequate runway safety areas, Chris?
Well, I think something many people are aware of and has already been mentioned on this panel is implementation of the engineered materials arresting system. Right now we've got one vendor, Zodiac ESCO, that provides that. I know through the REDAC, the Airport Technologies Group that you mentioned, there's been investigation into alternative technologies. I think we've looked at a Scandinavian group, Steve, that's producing glass pebbles, essentially, recycled glass pebbles that might provide similar type of capabilities. And those systems have been extraordinarily and dramatically effective, whether it's Charleston, West Virginia, which was mentioned. I think that's where you were going. Key West, I think more recently, with spectacular video of the actual save. And those systems are being deployed around the country. In other cases, some other cases, airports are looking at reducing some of the usable runway length, maybe not something that's particularly popular, as you always like to have runway in front of you, but looking at reducing what you can count on when you do your flight planning to ensure that full safety areas can be provided, or capable safety areas can be provided. I think what we've dealt with, and this has been a great focus of the FAA over the last 8-9 years, we've really had this runway safety area focus, the focus on overrun prevention really being a huge issue for the Office of Airports, for airport operators and their compliance. And we're looking forward to wrapping that up. Hopefully by 2015, the deadline, congressional deadline that we've got. Probably some of the more complex projects extend a little bit beyond that. But I think once we get to that point where we've addressed the safety area problems, the runway end safety area problems, attention needs to probably shift to some of the other areas where we're looking at excursions, sideline excursions. How do we address some of the hazards that exist to the sidelines of some of these airports that may not have been considerations? And I think that that's probably the next step where we need to be going. How do we look towards some of the preventive technologies, whether that's onboard aircraft that's already been mentioned? And I'd add to, Patrick, your discussion of that, how do we expand the distribution of that information back, not just to the towers, but to the airport operators who will need to be called on to address that loss of friction? I'm thinking typically in a winter scenario here, or maybe through temporary closures if it's an issue dealing with drainage, or longer term kind of drainage improvements for dealing with rain. How do we improve that reporting that might take place from and address? I think you've got a question coming up on winter condition reporting. How do we bring TALPA ARC, the Takeoff and Landing Performance Rulemaking Committee, to conclusion with some actionable guidance to all of the entities, the pilots or airport operators or air traffic controllers, on how we're distributing that information and how we're making what the airport experiences, what an airport operator out there on the field doing field condition reporting experiences, something that's actionable on the pilot basis and something that is actually representative of that pilot experience. And I think that's been a significant challenge to us all around as we look at measurement using vehicles that are not aircraft to report mu values, the friction values out on runways. And I think as we need to move to the aircraft-based systems, I'm optimistic about that. I'm optimistic, I think guardedly optimistic about some of the work that's being done at the Airport Technologies Subcommittee and with the Airport Technologies Group up in Atlantic City to evaluate how we get to better friction measurement. But those are the types of things I think we need to focus on once we get beyond ensuring that the overrun areas are protected, really the runway end safety areas are protected.
Yes. And definitely when we heard the question earlier today about the mu readings and how the United States is starting to work its way away from mu readings and going more to a basic condition report. And as we all know, an 18-wheel truck stops differently than a VW Beetle, and it's the same thing with aircraft. And so 2 different reports based on geographic location, where that pilot's based, can be completely hit or miss. And so you say you're guardedly optimistic. I agree with you. Working on that same panel, coming up with an actual friction value is something that the smart people down at the FAA Tech Center are going to work on, and I'm really hoping they can come up with a baseline number so that we could maybe start just transmitting these numbers directly so that the controllers can issue the proper guidance. I think it's definitely a good thing that's being worked on. Another thing you touched upon, Chris, and I wanted to expand on it a little bit. We talked about the runway safety area, and it goes past the runway. And the Office of Airports and the CFRs point out and say that, right up to the airport fence is where the regulations end for the airport. And it's frustrating for airports, I'm sure, when there's a proposed structure to be built, maybe about a mile or 2 miles off the end of a heavy departure corridor. Now, currently there is no regulation right now that holds some developers to standards to stay under the safe navigable area when all engines are operating on the aircraft. And in the case of, say, an engine failure, we start to run into obstacle issues with those buildings or obstacles that are being placed offline. I know it's been very frustrating for airport planners. I know, Chris, your background is airport planning. I've been involved with some panels on this discussion. What's your take on that, and what could we do, maybe collaboratively as a group, to sit down and come up with a solution besides regulations? But how can we influence that?
Well, and I'm not averse to as much as I don't know if I've sounded like that here today, but not averse to all regulations. And I think with respect to the control of tall objects off airport property, I mean that's just like with the avian issue. Once we get beyond the airport fence, we work into Wild West issues with who's got responsibility and who's got the authority to control. FAA really does not. They can issue hazard determinations, and we're looking forward to a point where we can get those hazard determinations to be made reliably when there's violation of one engine inoperative surface, defined one engine inoperative surface. We're hopefully, I mean, we've been kind of working, I think FAA, airports, the airlines have been working that issue for the last, well, actually preceding when I arrived at ACI, so the last five and a half years. It seems like we're getting to the point of conclusion there where we might have definitions of the surfaces that FAA is willing to provide hazard determinations on, providing some specifications about how airports can depict those surfaces, and that'll help us. Right now, there isn't that guidance, so when it gets into an issue of, what an insurer of that particular developer's building might be looking for, the hazard determination doesn't come out, so there isn't, the insurer goes ahead and insures the building, and we're all fat, dumb, and happy and go forward, right? With those hazard determinations, hopefully that won't happen as much. But even with that change in guidance, I think it takes us as airports working together with the pilot and airline communities, with the FAA, and I'd say maybe to a little bit lesser extent on this, the controllers directly, at least to define how difficult situations can be as you're trying to work within very, very narrowly defined corridors with an aircraft experiencing a problem, one engine inoperative situation, to go to the insurers, to go to the county commissions, to go to the zoning boards that exist, to convey the magnitude of the problem and work with them, because they really are, when we talk about the insurers and the folks that deal with zoning, those are the folks who really have the direct authority to control these types of structures and mitigate them before they're built, ensure that you're not allowing 3-4 stories to go up in the midst of an OEI surface. And it's we're in the process right now at ACI of working on best practices guidance for exactly that situation. And we're kind of a bit stalled because we're waiting for FAA to issue definitive guidance on OEI. But I think we'll see a lot of developments on that front over the next 2 to 3 years. And I think already here today, as you mentioned, there's been some discussion of the buildings in Roslyn, which are just one example of where how these OEI surfaces can be penetrated and the actions we need to take broadly, not just to airports, but we're reaching out more broadly to counties, municipalities to ensure that those types of things don't occur.
Definitely. With excursions, and we discussed it, we touched upon the Talpa Arc. What happens when an airport comes out and they have a very snowy day up in the north, and they come out and they sweep the runway and do a condition check? Chris, how does that communication start at your airport level, work its way through the controller? And let's do the telephone chain and get this to this pilot to use that knowledge.
Sure. I mean, I'd start with maybe the more official mechanisms that we're looking, really as at the NOTAMs. Some folks who go north of the border start to call them SNOTAMs. It's really through those mechanisms that the official lines of communication are open. Now, I think, that's in the heat of the moment. I think the more effective plans are those that have really worked among the communities on their winter operations plans in advance of that season. And I think most of the larger airports, many of the smaller airports, do work through some winter operations meetings. We're really starting now, midsummer, to begin that line of communication so that outside of the official lines of communication, you have the more informal, unofficial lines so that airport ops center or the snow desk that day is communicating directly or has direct representation from air traffic, for instance, at the seats at that table. To some extent, might extend across to some of the station managers as well, although I think that's generally been more of a ramp issue, more of an apron issue to make sure aprons are cleared than it has been runway condition reporting. I think the challenge, something we've already talked about, is that uniform reporting, something that gets beyond kind of more subjective reporting, has been a difficult concept to convey, difficult issues to standardize among all the airports. And that was, that's, I think, one of the holy grails that the TALP ARC has sought to, obtain, to promote out there. But that's still not, that effort hasn't been completed. And I'm hopeful that through those efforts, when we can finally wrap it up, finally validate the matrix that we all talk about, the condition reporting matrix that actually has some correlation between the pilot experience and what the field measurements are, we'll achieve some of that. But just say, in advance of that, a message that we try to send is you got to rely on more than just the NOTAMs. There has to be, there ought to be the closer coordination during those events so that we aren't missing something, so that something that comes back from that pilot who isn't necessarily talking to the ops people and rarely will be talking directly to the ops people back to the tower gets back down to the airport operations staff and vice versa. And so that it isn't simply an understanding of what those NOTAMs are saying, but there's a closer kind of real-time coordination on how conditions are deteriorating.
And I think the vital key of this is the anchor person in the middle, who is the air traffic controller, because the communications between your airport and our cockpit goes through the air traffic controller. Rick, any comments on that?
And it goes in both directions.
Yes.
Because the airport operator relies on your reports of what's going on in the airport, which takes me to one of my favorite winter messages: good, fair, poor, or nil. Not really, 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 really poor. Yeah. I can't pass that on. What am I going to do with that? We know there's a lot of pressure on everybody not to get your buddy who you've got a tea time with tomorrow is right behind you on final. And I could not use that N word. So we need to know what it is and something that's usable. One of the good things about working at DFW is 13,000 feet of runway. They only get snow or icy once every other year. So having come down there from Connecticut and Massachusetts was quite an interesting change. But yeah, we just need to get the word. The airports give us a report and we pass it on to you, and hopefully it's clear and makes sense to everybody.
Definitely.
One thing that I'd throw out there, and it's a concept that I think incredibly valuable, already mentioned, familiarization. I'll throw it under that broad term. And I think there are opportunities that we aren't fully taking advantage of on the airport side to get some of the pilots out onto the field. I think somebody mentioned, you mentioned, I think, Rick, going out to take a look at the hold areas. It goes beyond that to really experience what it's like to do some of that field reporting, to understand what the airport operators are seeing and feeling. And I think just to have the pilots understand how similar is that to what you're experiencing, how dissimilar is that, to really understand some of those limitations of reporting and be prepared. So.
And we at ALPA, we fly to over 170 Part 139 airports. Some are much smaller, and in the U.S. and Canada. And we have a strong volunteer force of pilots. Some are in this room, some are at home. We're out flying the line right now, but a number of volunteers that go out and meet with the airports, as you well know, and I advertise that, who are there just with a safety agenda, and they try to get out and visually see what's happening and report back and say, you know, Columbia Airport has the same issues as Bismarck, North Dakota. So it's a good program, and I appreciate the short plug on that. We're going to go ahead and start with our final subject. That's something that, it's just like highways. You have two seasons. You have winter and construction on the highways, and the same is with airports. When the weather gets nice up in the north, we start to see a number of construction projects start, and they take sometimes years to complete, and a lot of money is flowing from the government to make major infrastructure changes, and we support that. You know, new runways, resurfacing projects, and taxiway rehab is very important. As we start to see the traffic explode here, we're going to see numbers climbing in the next 2 decades that, frankly, it's going to take a lot of infrastructure changes. What challenges do we have as a group up here with construction? And I know, Chris, this could be a 4-hour subject for you, but
absolutely,
it's got to be tough.
Well, I mean, finding the mechanisms to communicate that, especially to those in the pilot community that may not be frequently flying into that facility is a huge challenge. I think at the same time from the airport front, managing a safe construction or maintenance site is a significant challenge, and I think FAA would point to this. I mean, we've had a number of incidents. There was one, well-publicized incursion incident up at Boston that has prompted a whole number of changes. I know, just talking to the folks up at Massport, in the way that they do, fundamentally manage safety during construction. Their reliance on specific escorts and those who that's their only job, and they're continually aware of how they need to move through movement areas. Is practices they've adopted. So those are, they're different challenges, but both have impacts on the safety. I'd point to those as they're both awareness issues. So and what the perfect ways to do that are, I don't know that I've got all of those answers, and I think especially on how we communicate, how we find, I don't know, we're not going to focus a whole heck of a lot on NOTAMs, but how we focus on a more effective system when you've got hundreds of lines to read through to know what's going on the construction side is something, it's a collective challenge that I think we need to be focused on.
I fly to, you said Boston, I might fly there maybe once every couple of years, and so I think the task goes to the airlines now, to how do you educate a pilot. At my airline, we fly to, I'm going to probably get the number wrong, but hundreds, 200 some odd, 300, 400 some odd airports around the world. How does the airline, when a construction project pops up, what does the airline do to educate the pilot prior to the flight?
Yeah, I want to jump in there on a couple of things. One is I've had some experiences over the last couple of years that showed that we needed more emphasis on the pre-construction conferences. Mm-hmm. We need to get all the entities in there. They need to use almost an SMS approach. They need to look at the proposed project and ideate where are the potential hotspots or hazards in this. Then how do we risk assess those, how do we mitigate those, and then how do we continuously monitor the effectiveness. So, I'm thinking of things like the parallel runway construction at JFK. So we found out that after the fact, we kind of found out that large construction vehicles running on the parallel runway were generating ASDX events. So maybe it's a concept of beta testing your ASDX, all your multilateration for the construction project, maybe late at night when there isn't a whole lot of traffic, or when however you can do that, so that it's calibrated to either detect or not detect those kinds of potential conflicts. I know at Fort Lauderdale, they actually accelerated the development of a RNAV visual approach procedure so that they could mitigate some of the construction operations. So all those kinds of things I think by getting all the stakeholders into the planning process, into the pre-construction conference, and developing some strategies to go forward. One of the other, I read an IFALPA alert, reread it actually the other night in preparation for the conference, that had to do with a large metropolitan Midwestern airport where they foreshortened the runways during construction, and resulted in some phraseology that led the crews to believe that they could take a runway and have full length available. Well, it turned out instead of 11,200 feet, the full length was 6,700 feet or something of that nature. So we've learned, sadly, we've kind of learned after the fact, but we've aggressively brought that into the fold and said, okay, those are the things we really need to think about. And we need to broadcast that information out to the crews. As soon as we can put together a package that, like a 10-7 message that says, here's what's going on at Fort Lauderdale, plan for these kinds of occurrences. Mark is, of course, naturally, signage and marking is incredibly important. I've been at Boston for the RSAT meetings and during the construction taxiway Mike. I've been at San Francisco and LA and seen the big X's they put up when they lighted X's at night, and alternate taxi procedures. And as Chris talked about, we've had at Runway Safety Council, we've had any number of events that were triggered by people who are largely kind of unfamiliar with the airport, and then when they land and get an alternate taxi route, it's very confusing. So it's especially sensitive probably for the GA people, the people that aren't routinely flying in and out of there, to get a taxi clearance is very abnormal. Then I think in those cases it's helpful, and as Rick alluded to, if the controller can lean forward a little bit and say, hey, let me give you a progressive just to make sure you're clear of this construction area. If it's not too busy and it doesn't result in frequency congestion, all those kind of things are helps. So that's what we need to encourage, I think.
That's a great point. That article that you read, I had a great big hand in, and I appreciate the plug on that. We, in fact, to the ALPA members in the room, 2 weeks ago we were offered a position with the Aviation Construction Advisory Council. And we gladly accepted. We appreciate the invite from the FAA and the members that are on board. Jim Krieger at O'Hare and Dave Seward at JFK reached out to us, and we're happy to be a part of it to give the pilot's perspective. To close it out, Rick, any concerns with construction other than all these vehicles and people moving around on taxiways and service roads?
The initial reaction, I think, in the control tower when there's construction is a concern about my efficiency. They're going to slow me down. I can't do this or I can't do that. And since Chicago happened, a large Midwestern airport,
Well, it's really difficult to figure out.
we have been more proactive in having good construction meetings in the air traffic towers and having the controllers and the airlines and the airport operator and everybody involved to get a better idea in a timely manner of what to expect, and then to actually have a plan for that. And the first ones, people sort of thought this was crazy. I'll just work around it. And you have, a facility with 50 or 60 controllers in there, and they're all doing a different thing to get around the construction. That's not helping anybody. We have the benefit of seeing that construction every day for however many years that it is, and it's pretty easy to see where it is. I'm 300 feet in the air, and I'm 2 miles away. So you have to be appreciative of what the pilot is seeing and having I believe, a homogeneous plan that everybody will follow so that it's a repeatable thing. And for the air carrier pilots that do fly repetitively to that area, you'll learn, you'll figure out kind of what's going on, and we'll find a way to get around the construction area. But it's important that you all are involved in the beginning anyway, because I may have a great idea. Air traffic-wise, it makes sense. Usually that means it's easy, it takes very few words, and it's fast. So that's what I'm looking for. But if it involves something with you and your aircraft, right-hand turns are harder than left-hand turns, I can't see, my co-pilot has a big head this month, or whatever the deal is, we need to know that. And you're the expert, so we need to make sure that you're plugged in with it as well. So that's the main thing, is just getting everybody. And I think that's one of the things I would say, really to applaud my employers, the FAA, in doing in the last few years, is this whole collaboration thing. And it's been a big buzzword today and all over, but it really is important to recognize that, okay, if we invite airline A or B to come to our meeting, we're likely going to get an executive or someone who doesn't fly or doesn't fly very often or whatever, there's actually a benefit to not only bringing that person, because they have a whole different strategic view. Whatever they're worried about is sure not what I'm worried about, but it's important. And you also have to have the line pilots involved, and it's the same thing with air traffic. You need to have the controllers at the table as well as management, because if we come up with something that's going to take more bodies, I can't make more people come into work. That's not my role. So you have to get everybody at the table, and the phrase I use is make a decision on purpose. So it's one thing to make a decision and do something, but in order to make it repeatable, you have to be able to explain the reason why you do it. And it has to be reasoned. And I think we're getting there.
Yeah. To sum up exactly, I think collaboration is the key. I think every person on this stage here, I know I'm a phone call away from getting an answer or someone who could find an answer, and it goes back towards our direction too. And I mean, it has been a used word today, collaboration, working together, and I think we're starting to see it and it bears fruit. With that being said, I'm going to go ahead and open it up to questions and answers. If anyone would like to approach the microphones, please do me a favor. Let me know who you are and which organization you're with, and feel free for our panelists to ask questions. John.
Bill DeGrow with American Eagle. I'm the ALPA Aircraft Design and Operations Group Chair. Also, they recently elected new IFALPA ADO Group Chair, and I raced Mike up here to the mic, so I beat him. My question has to do with the TALPA. I have one question, a comment, and I'll finish with a question. It was with the TALPA ARC. I spent a number of years as a participant in the TALPA ARC, and that, I think, was the first time in which there was a holistic approach taken to addressing the contaminated runway issue, where we had airports, the aircraft manufacturer, airlines, pilot organizations. It was as the word is, a collaborative effort. And there was compromises made for sure, but there was a lot of great result out of that. The other aspect was a mentioning about the braking action nil through the ICAO Friction Task Force. That we've been talking about that term nil. We want to keep all the tools available, right? Maybe runway friction measurement, contaminant type and depth, and a pilot braking action report. The issue with the nil bit, even in the United States, is pilots are reluctant to call a runway nil. And it's even more so, I think, outside of the United States when English is not the native tongue, because they think of nil as being zero, and that isn't really the case. So through the ICAO Friction Task Force, we've been talking about maybe there should be a different term, something that would indicate something less than poor to get some mitigation going. So my question is, to conclude, my question is, where is the status of the TALPA ARC? Are we any closer to any kind of rulemaking? And that's for Mr. Doyle. Are we any closer to any kind of rulemaking as a result of the recommendations out of the TALPA ARC?
I would, that's a very good question. Lengthy, and I appreciate the background to start with. The TALPA ARC certainly has been a driving force, and whether we are close to putting regulations in place because of that, I am not part of a rulemaking committee. I'm not sure that I could speak to that exactly. My office in runway safety, we basically are collaborators and suggestion makers. We are not rule makers. I would have to take your question to a higher level, and I'm more than willing to do that. Maybe we could speak at the break, and I could get your information. I would be happy to follow up on that with you, but I am not the person to talk to you about rulemaking. I'm sorry.
I can add to that, Captain Bill. We've been working with the Office of Airports Safety and Standards, asked the questions. It's on the shelf right now at the FAA, and with the collaborative bodies, we're trying to restart it and re-energize the discussion. So it is being discussed at the FAA and amongst our organization. So thank you for the question. Sir.
Hi, good afternoon. My name is Ken Pasco with Friends of LaGuardia Airport. Thank you, Steve, for bringing up the bird strike issue. Being from New York and being part of the aviation community in the New York metropolitan area, I couldn't help but to come up here and talk a little bit about bird strikes and the challenges that we have in the New York City area. About 2 years ago, ALPA opposed the construction of the North Shore Marine Transfer Station, which is a municipal solid waste transfer station currently under construction in the LaGuardia Runway's 31 runway protection zone. This 100-foot tall facility will process about 4,000 tons of municipal waste each and every day. Bird strike experts call this the ultimate bird magnet. The FAA and the USDA's joint study on this transfer station concluded two main things. The first one was, according to the risk matrix, it's safer to build a facility and then to mitigate it than not to build it at all. The second conclusion that the report came up with was that the transfer station could be consistent with safe airport operations if mitigated. The City of New York has refused to mitigate a known hazard, and the FAA has said since the facility is not on airport property, they're toothless to stop this known hazard from being built. The city has also learned that since they can now get away with building these transfer stations within the airport protected area, that they decided to go ahead and build another one on the opposite side called the East 91st Street Marine Transfer Station in Manhattan, about 3.5 miles from LaGuardia Airport, completely on the opposite side, creating a flyway between the two transfer stations with LaGuardia sitting right in the middle. So what could potentially happen is the birds fly from one food source to the other, back and forth, right over the top of LaGuardia Airport. So this raises a couple of questions in my mind that I'd like the panel to consider. The first one is, what can be done so that the FAA can enforce the rules and regulations and their guidance off of airport property? And how can we encourage the FAA to take a more affirmative role in these types of issues?
Mr. Pasker?
Yeah.
I'm sorry, we're running short on time
Okay.
with this, because that could be a long discussion. As you know, we've been actively involved with the Marine Transfer Facility construction. I've seen you at a lot of the same meetings. And as you well know, and we publicly state, and we submitted into our public docket comments in opposition to the construction of that Marine Transfer Facility built at LaGuardia. As you do well know, it is being litigated accordingly, and we're monitoring its progress, but your points are well taken, and I do appreciate it. We're running short on time. Great. I'd be happy to speak with you afterwards, and we could get together and work with folks on the panel, but we're running short, and I want to make sure.
Great, I like that. Thank you very much.
Good. Thank you very much. And with that being said, I'd like to bring up Captain Chuck Hogan for just a brief presentation. And I'd like to thank our panel members as well. Thank you very much for your time. Appreciate it. Please join me in a round of applause.